The next step after learning how to figure out how many significant digits you have, or significant figures, is learning how to figure out where to round numbers when you add together numbers or subtract numbers that were measured. So let me give you this example. Let's say that I give a piece of paper to you and your lab partner, and I tell you together to figure out what the perimeter of the piece of paper is. Now, perimeter means to add together the length of this side, this side, this side, and this side. And we're going to assume that this side and this side are the same length, and this side and this side are the same length as each other. So your lab partner, let's say, gets the ruler down here at the bottom. And your lab partner then reads that ruler and says, okay, this looks like 5 point, looks like 3 little lines between the 3 and the 4. So your lab partner says 5.3, looks like about halfway, 5.35 centimeters. And that would mean this other side is also 5.35 centimeters. Now you have a centimeter ruler that doesn't have the lines in between. So when you measure, you get a length that is 5.4. That's what you estimate is where that ruler ends, right there, 5.4. And so that side is also 5.4 centimeters. So how are you going to get the perimeter? Well, you have to add all the sides together, right? So you're going to do 5.35 plus 5.35 plus 5.4 plus 5.4. Now in math class, they probably taught you to add in little zeros here, right? But I'm going to do them in red. And the reason I'm going to do them in red is because those are not significant digits. You did not measure with that ruler that was 0. You estimated. In fact, the 4 is an estimate. You definitely can't guess what these are, not with that ruler. Maybe if you took the other ruler, you could figure it out, but we're going to pretend we can't do that. So when we add all of this together, this is what we get. We put 0 here, put up a 1, 6, 7, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Yes, I have to count aloud when I add. It's very sad. 5, 10, 15, 20, 21. 21.50 is the answer that I would get with my calculator, or just my brain. And that's centimeters, right? That's the perimeter. But the problem is we can't leave it that way because that makes it seem like we know exactly how much distance we have all the way out to this digit. But we don't really, do we? Because 2 of our measurements don't go out that far. We're not allowed to go out any further in our answer than we did in the least of our measurements. So we have 2 measurements that aren't that precise. Our answer can't be that precise. The rule with adding and subtracting numbers is that you can't have any more decimal places than you had in the least of your answers. So we only had 1 decimal place here and 1 decimal place here. So our answer can only have 1 decimal place. So when we report the answer of what our perimeter is, we're only allowed to say it's 21.5 centimeters. If we say it's 21.50 centimeters, that would be like saying that both of us, me and my lab partner, we both had rulers that measure out 2 decimal places, but we didn't. And this may seem like a silly example because why would one of us use a less precise ruler? But it was just something I could think of off the top of my head. This does come up, believe it or not. There are times when you have no choice but to add together measurements that have different levels of precision. When you do that, you can't let your answer be any more precise than the least of your measurements. And by the least of, I mean the one with the least number of decimal places. Now this is going to be really important because it's a totally different set of rules for multiplying and dividing measured numbers. So I can't stress enough the importance of the following. When you add or subtract measured numbers, the answer you get can only have as many decimal places as the least of your numbers. Adding and subtracting is about decimal places. If you have one number that doesn't have any decimal places, your answer can't have any decimal places. If you have one number that only has 1 decimal place, your answers can only have 1 decimal place. I want you to remember this because when we do multiplying and dividing, we're not going to use decimal places. We're going to use something else, and that gets really confusing. So what you're going to do is you're going to look now at some practice problems and see if you can apply the rule for what to round to. Okay, let's say I had these two numbers. Go ahead and subtract them. Pause the tutorial while you subtract them and then see if you can figure out what you have to round it to get the right answer. Okay, hopefully when you did this you realize that yes, you can put the 0 here if you want to, but it's not a significant 0. So you're going to get an answer of 402 centimeters. But since I only have, this number doesn't have any decimal places at all, that 0 isn't really there, right? I just added it in to hold my place while I did my subtraction. Because of that, my answer can't have any decimal places. And since the first decimal place is only a 4, this is going to round to simply 20 centimeters. And to show that that 0 is significant, I could write a little line over it that shows that, hey, I did measure that 0 at least. Okay, let's try another one. Okay, how about this? Go ahead and pause and see, after you calculate it, what you would round to. Okay, hopefully you realize that when you subtract the 1.2 from the 54.10, I'm going to throw in that fake 0 again. This is what your calculator might give you, or what you would get if you were using, the strategy that I'm using here for subtraction. But my answer can only have one decimal place. So that's going to be 52.9 in whatever units I was measuring in. All right, let's do one more. Okay, you can go ahead and add up these three numbers. So I'm going to actually take out my calculator and do this one. 22.13 plus 150 plus 31 gives me 203.13. All right, what do I round it to? Well, I don't have any decimal places in the number 31, so my answer is just going to be 203. You might need to practice this before you move on to multiplication and division. So do that before you see the multiplication and division tutorial.